My name is Gabriella Romeo. I am a 3L at Widener and the SBA president, and I am joined today by Prince Holloway, an alum of Widener. We're super excited. We're going to have a fun conversation. So, Prince, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us your hometown, where you did your undergraduate work, and what year you graduated from Widener.
Sure. My name is Prince Holloway. From Philadelphia. I went to undergrad at Purdue University. I graduated from Widener in 2008, and I'm currently a trial lawyer at Stampone O'Brien Dilsheimer.
Awesome. And where is that located?
It's located in Cheltenham. We also have an office in Center City, Philadelphia.
Okay, super cool. So born and raised and back in your hometown.
Yeah, I came back right after law school.
That's great. So we're going to start off talking about why law school and what brought you to Widener.
So honestly, going to law school, I went to law school because I honestly couldn't find a job. It was 2005 and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I spoke to my old football coach who was an attorney, and he was like, "Hey, I think you got good enough grades. You should just give it a shot." And he was a criminal defense attorney. So that was really the main reason why I went to law school, because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
And so, so when you started law school, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I got to circle back. Were you interested in criminal defense like your coach, or did you just kind of want to get your feet wet and see what happens?
So I was, but I think after taking Professor Deem's criminal classes, I was just like, you know what, that's what I want to do.
Okay.
Just because I love this class. I loved reading like the cases.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember like I interned at the DA's office all through law school, the Philly DA's office all through law school. And I was like, that's what I want to do.
Okay.
But then when I graduated in 2008, city had a hiring freeze, so I couldn't work there. So I went to work at the Montgomery County prosecutor's office, and I worked there for like 4 years. But I think Professor Deem, because it was the way he kept the classes interesting, that made me want to do criminal law starting out.
Oh, I love Professor Deem.
Yeah, he's the man.
He just retired, and I loved having him, and I'm so sad there's a group of students that won't get to experience his greatness.
Right.
He's a lot of fun in class, and he's so sweet outside of the classroom too. And so while you were at Widener, did you have any extracurriculars you participated in, with student orgs or internships that helped shape your experience?
Yeah, I was in Balsa, I believe. That was it. I think we did like intramural basketball. I don't even remember what we did back then. I just remember playing a lot of basketball in law school.
That's an outlet.
Yeah, it was a lot of basketball. I think they had a basketball court like on the campus or something like that.
Still there.
Yeah, I just remember playing a lot of basketball. I didn't really do like too many extracurriculars. It was just like my little study hall job at the computer lab, and then study and play basketball, and that was it.
It sounds like a good combination. You have to find a way to let that stress out, and athletics are a good way to do that.
I mean, there was a lot of beer involved too, but yeah.
That also happens. I think that probably still happens.
Right.
So were there any, you mentioned Professor Deem's classes, were there any classes that you found are still, when you got into practice, you're like, this class really helped me, like looking back, or classes you wish you would have taken?
Yeah. So your first year classes, and it's funny because the first year classes are probably the most important, I think, when it comes to actually practicing as an attorney. So Civ Pro is definitely like a big class that, I'll be honest with you, I did not understand when I was a 1L. I just didn't understand it. But what I do now, I do mostly personal injury cases now. I'm literally using it every day, and I'm trying to stretch the rules to help bring a lawsuit in a certain place that's a better venue for my client and so forth. So like literally 2 hours ago, I just signed up in a new case, and I have a client who was hit by a tractor trailer.
Oh, wow.
She lives in Florida. The defendant driver lives in Pennsylvania. The tractor trailer company is from Ohio. And the accident happened in North Jersey.
Oh my goodness.
I'm trying to figure out where can I bring in this case. So that's just like one instance where Civ Pro comes in, you know?
I start to be proud right now.
Yeah, and I'm like, it's a law school exam. And I'm like, hey, do I want to be in state court? Do I want to be in federal court? Like, where's the best place that I'm going to get the best venue for my client? So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, but definitely Civ Pro. I wish that I would have taken that as a 3L, because I think when you're a 1L, you really don't know how to think. Like they're telling you just everything. Nothing makes sense. It takes you like an hour and a half, 2 hours to read 10 pages, and you just don't understand everything. But I think if I would have taken it as like a 3L, I would have had the understanding of, okay, this is how this actually works. You know.
I do. I relate to that. I remember before my first exam, my first civil procedure exam, my first semester, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I understand any of this. And like 2 days before the exam, it like clicked in my head.
Right.
And
Right.
it worked, but I've had so many people tell me the same thing that you just said, that civil procedure, like you really do use that, whether it's state or federal, like it all comes into play at some point. So knowing that well makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So Civ Pro, evidence is a huge one. I think that's probably the most important class that you could probably take in law school, because the rules literally can make or break your case. There's certain things, whether you're working as a prosecutor or doing what I do now with personal injury, there's certain things that you want in, there's certain things that you don't want to come in. So I think evidence is another one, and torts, obviously, because I'm a personal injury attorney. So shout out to Professor Kearney, because she was my torts professor.
She's great.
Yeah.
She is. I had Professor Robinette for torts, but I took a seminar with Kearney, and they're both amazing.
She is incredible. She is incredible.
I wish I could be on campus to see her. Yeah,
and that's another class that I wish like I would have taken when I understood how to think a little bit better as an attorney. Because when you're sitting there and you've never had any experience with like a motor vehicle accident or a product liability case and so forth, and they're throwing these terms at you like causation and so forth, you're like what does that mean? You know? But like actually when you finish working and you start working, you start understanding like, oh, this is what they were talking about back then.
Now I get it.
Right. Now I get it.
It makes sense. It makes you want to like call your professor and be like, I understand it now.
Right.
Yeah. Those are good aha moments.
Yeah.
Did you find that you had any of those aha moments while you were in school?
I think it was after. I think my aha moment was my first semester, second year. And I think it was like after the first year, I worked an internship, and then I felt like I'm not sure if it's because I was in court working at the DA's office or what it was, but I felt like I was a lawyer. And I felt like I knew how to think a little bit better, and I was understanding like what was going on and what was expected of me and so forth. And then I also realized that it's just different in the real world as opposed to law school. I remember like my first year legal methods professor, we might have like a paper or something due. And like, I'm not sure if this is true or this is just the way it was. Like we weren't allowed to talk to anybody about the paper.
Still like that.
Okay, so it's not how it works in the real world, you know? So I felt like it was very like isolating, but like if I draft a brief right now or a motion for summary judgment or a complaint, like I can go to anyone here and say, hey, read this, or, hey, what do you think about this argument? Or, hey, am I being like too out of line right here? So it's not that isolated in the real world, and you can ask people questions and you can get feedback. And if you don't know something, you can ask somebody something. So that's like a major difference as opposed to like being a Widener, just having like your tunnel vision and trying to figure it out. I felt like when I was there, it was just like the blind leading the blind. Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, it is like you don't know what you're doing.
You think you do.
Prime example. I had a mediation yesterday for a pretty serious case in which my client was sexually assaulted by one of her coworkers on the way home from work. And I have people here that I can talk to and say, hey, what do you think this case is worth? Where do you think I should file it? And they filed a motion for summary judgment. What do you think about this argument and so forth? So it's a collaborative effort from your paralegals to everyone else who wants to help you. You're not just doing it alone. And I felt like when I was in school, it was like you're alone and you have to figure it out.
There's a lot of those moments. I think that's very relatable for a lot of students.
Right.
And so I think then to transition into the real world, can you speak to what your position is now and kind of your day-to-day life in that position?
Okay, so I'm a trial attorney here at Stampone Law. I started off at the DA's office for the first 4 years, and then I worked at a medical malpractice firm. And we did mostly medical malpractice cases and child abuse cases and I worked there for like 2 years, maybe 3 years. And then I've been here for like the last 5 or 6. So I'm pretty old now. And my day to day is literally, I wake up, I get my kids ready. I have 3 kids, 7, 3, and I have a 2-month-old. I drop them off at school, and after I sign my kid in the daycare, I look at my phone, and I probably already have 10 to 15 missed calls from whether it's clients and so forth. And I'm sitting in my kid's parking lot, and I'm seeing priority, like who I need to call back, like who's important, and it's usually based on the value of their case. Then I usually respond to like 1 or 2 emails right there in the parking lot, and then I drive to work. And at work, I usually have either a deposition that I have to do or a motion that I have to respond to. There's always something pressing, like once I get here. So the car ride in, I'm usually trying to contact most of my clients who I need to talk to. And then I'm just putting out fires all day. I'm putting out fires, and I'm trying to push these cases to the finish line. You know, we work in a place where I don't get paid unless my client gets paid. So most of my cases are done on a contingency fee. So the faster you can move the case, the quicker you can get paid on them.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask is there a typical timeline, or is for like certain types of cases, or like is that
so it all depends. It all depends. You can have it just all depends. The bigger cases that come in, and when I say bigger cases, I mean cases that are catastrophic injuries where someone loses a limb or something like really just terrible happens. Those are cases that don't sit. You get them and you get all the medical records, you understand what their injuries are, and you just file a lawsuit, because defendants, insurance companies, they rarely pay you what that case is worth without filing a lawsuit. Some of the smaller cases you can get worked out just by sending a package over to the insurance company, and you can say, hey, give me 50 to 100 grand. But like when you're talking about 7-figure, 8-figure cases, like, you know, when that case comes in that you have to file a lawsuit right away.
Are there any cases from your career that really stick out to you?
Oof. You know what, I hate to sound like I'm desensitized. A lot of them do run together. I handle a lot of child abuse cases, so kids who are sexually assaulted in institutional settings, whether it's foster care, daycare. I've had cases where kids are sexually assaulted in group home settings. So I'm not sure if any one particularly stands out. I could talk to you about the case that I just settled yesterday, in which this woman was sexually assaulted by a coworker. He was convicted of rape. The company failed to run a background check. And it's kind of like emotionally draining sometimes. But you kind of like just learn to move on to the next one. It's weird. It's a weird dynamic once you start like looking at these cases. You know, I remember when my first year working at the DA's office, my boss came in. It was probably like my second or third week there, and he was like, "Hey, you're going to second chair this case with me." And it was a homicide case of an infant. And he literally threw the file down, and I opened it up, and it was my first time seeing an autopsy of an infant.
Oh wow.
And I literally just sat there, like tears running down my eyes, like, oh my gosh, this little baby and so forth. And I remember just being like shaken that day. Couldn't go to lunch, couldn't eat anything. And then literally like 3 years later, hey, Prince, you're working this file. Same thing. and I'm literally like eating a sandwich and like going through the case. And it's just like, you just become really desensitized doing like criminal stuff and some of the heavier personal injury cases.
So I actually recently wrote a paper on trauma-informed lawyering and secondary and vicarious trauma that a lot of attorneys can encounter when working in situations like that. Do you find that something, like, have you gone through any sort of training to help with dealing with other people's trauma? Or do you have things that you do, like when you get home to kind of decompress from your day?
Yeah, so I've never sought out help, but I do, well, before the pandemic, I did a lot of CrossFit, and I've picked up doing yoga. I do like yoga like almost every day now. Yesterday was just one of those long days, so it was just like a beer and a cigar when I got home. But yeah, I do a lot of yoga because you realize that it affects you.
Absolutely.
You know?
No, I'm really interested.
Yeah, and it also affects your parenting. Like I deal with, even from working at the DA's office, dealing with like people who are sexually assaulted and doing what I do now with the kids in foster care and so forth. Like it affects my parenting. Like my kids will never sleep at someone else's house. That's just the way it's going to go. It's never going to happen. So don't ask me. So yeah.
I can understand that. I'm very interested in working with victims. I interned at a domestic violence legal center.
Which one?
At the YWCA in Harrisburg.
Okay, gotcha.
And I did that after my first semester, and I just really loved that experience. And I also grew up with a foster brother, so I have, my heart lies in working with people that are in situations like that.
Gotcha.
So I commend and appreciate and admire someone who also takes on that work, because I know I don't have a lot of experience in it, but I know it's not easy.
Right.
So then, is there certain parts of your job that you enjoy? Like, do you like writing briefs, doing depositions, interviewing clients?
So I hate writing. I don't like writing at all. And it's weird because at the DA's office, I didn't write anything. Like everything was just boilerplate, like boilerplate summary judgment motions, boilerplate motion in limines, like everything was just boilerplate. And we had an appeals unit, so I didn't have to write anything. It was just, here's your file. Do I have my witnesses? And you're calling your first witness. So I was in trial every day. And now it's completely opposite. It's like I write literally every day now. I'm responding to summary judgment motions. I'm drafting out complaints. I'm filing motions myself for discovery. So I do a lot of writing now. The best part about my job, I think, is being in court, just arguing and doing depositions. Because in a deposition, you literally get to ask anything that might lead to relevant evidence. So it's wide open and it's a free for all. You can literally have you can literally ask whatever you want. And defense counsel can object, but they still have to answer it. So it's kind of fun from that standpoint.
Do you ever throw people off, like not intentionally, but you ask a question and you can tell they really didn't see that one coming?
I do it all the time. I do it on purpose, and yeah, and lawyers, it's very competitive. I'm not sure if you played sports in high school, but I think when you do litigation, it's the closest thing that you'll get to like playing sports.
Okay.
It literally is, because you're competing against the other person. You're telling them that, hey, if you don't settle this case, like I'm going to get a lot more than what you're offering and so forth. And it's just like that back and forth all the time. I have a good relationship with most of the defense attorneys I deal with. There are a couple that I can't stand. And I try to make their life as difficult as I possibly can. And they do the same. But I like that aspect of it.
It sounds like it presents a good challenge.
Oh, it's a challenge every day. It's a challenge every day. Like every day I come into my office, somebody is trying to take my head off. That's how I feel. And every day you come in, like you just want to throw an uppercut to somebody. That's what it is.
Do you think you would ever step into a different practice area?
No,
this is it.
No. I can tell you right now, if I had to do family law, I wouldn't be a lawyer. if I had to bill hours, I wouldn't be a lawyer. I can never do insurance defense work. Just because from a principle standpoint, I can never do it. So yeah, personal injury for me.
And what advice would you give to law students and like young attorneys that are looking to find their area of the law as much as you love personal injury?
So how can I help these people? So how to repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Sure, no. What advice would you give to law students and young attorneys that are starting to practice and trying to find an area of the law that they love?
I think it comes down to like whatever your favorite subject was in law school. I think if that's your subject, I think that's what you should do. Like I kind of pigeonhole myself because I took Dean's class and then I went right to the DA's office. And then I went to the DA's office again. And I was just like, I like criminal law. But you realize that doing criminal law or working the prosecutor's office, like you're only going to make so much money. And when I was at the prosecutor's office, I got married, and then my wife was like, we want to start a family. And it's just like, I could do criminal defense work, or I could go out and try to make a better living. You can make a lot of money doing criminal defense, don't get me wrong. But I could do something else that's helpful, that reminds me of being at the DA's office. And I think I found my niche here, representing like a lot of crime victims and so forth.
And so
the only reason I left the DA's office was for money. That was the only reason I left. It was probably the best job I ever had. I was able to, no, it was. And I worked a ton of crummy jobs. My first job was at the movies. I served like fraternities, food in college. That was a terrible job. The DA's office was by far the best, like most rewarding job, at least. Because if you had like a rape victim, they're like, oh my gosh, you put this guy in jail for a gazillion years. Like, thank you. Now I'm on the other side. It's just like, I'm the victim of something that happened terribly. And all I'm doing now is handing you a check saying, work it out, So it's just a different dynamic.
Did you find it was difficult to transition?
Yes. I would say it probably took me a good year and a half before I understood civil law as well as I understood criminal law, because it's really like it's a different language. It's a completely different language, and you're asking just different things. So I don't think I'd ever really seen a civil complaint before. So I left the DA's office, and then I went to like a catastrophic firm, and all they did was medical malpractice cases and sex abuse cases, and that was it. They didn't take cases that were like less than, for the most part, like $500,000. So it was an environment where every case is high stakes. And they're like, hey, draft this complaint. And I'm like, what do I do? So that was the biggest transition, like not knowing like, oh, you need an expert for this, or you need an expert to say this, or you need certain things lined up. It's just a completely different language that you're trying to learn.
And did you find just the more you did it, the easier it came to you?
Yeah. So yeah, it was the more you did it, and then you would go in like the archives, and I'd ask the paralegal like, okay, we got this foster care case against Children's Choice. What other case or similar facts did we have that they settled before? Like just give me that file. And then you could go through the file and say, oh, this is how this complaint is supposed to look. And this is how this discovery is supposed to look. And this is what he's getting out of the witnesses at depositions. And this was his angle. And this is the expert he used, and so forth. So you had to go back and look at like things they've done before, because it's not rocket science what you're doing here. And everything that for the most part comes across your desk, someone's done before. And if they haven't, like, you're going to be famous because you're making new law. So it was just going back, seeing what they've done. And for me, it was good to look at it from the beginning, because when you go to a new firm, 9 times out of 10, there's things in litigation already, and you're not sure how everything works. So when you're in the middle of a case and they say, hey, draft this, and you're like, well, what's going on? So it's nice to go back and see what they've done before. And then you can look at a previous file and be like, okay, this is how this works.
You're not reinventing the wheel.
Right.
And would you have any advice for practicing attorneys that are looking to make a transition like you did?
talk to as many people about where you think you might be wanting to go. If you're going to work at a firm, try to see if there's anyone that you may know who's worked there, so you can get the skinny on what's going on. There are some places that are toxic to work at. There are some places that are great to work at, but you want to talk to as many people and just do your research. Because just because something sounds like it might be a great job, it might not be a great fit, whether it's like personality and so forth. I think the people that you work with are the most important thing, because you spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your family. So it's really important just to work at a cool place.
Make sure you're in an environment that
Right.
works well for I. That's good advice.
Yeah. And you just want to realize like what kind of place are you working at? You know, like I'm in a hoodie and a hat, and I came in at 11:45, and no one's like banging on my door like, "Where's Prince Holloway?" You know? And you just want to know what the expectations might be. You know, so that's the only thing. Just knowing what the expectations are and making sure it's a cool place to work. That's about it.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
I worked full time before I came to law school, and it is really important that you.
Yeah, and that's one thing I probably should have done, because when I came to law school right out of college, and I was still like in party mode, and I didn't know what it was like to work 9 to 5. And I think if I had that like discipline, things would have went a lot more smoother for me like my first year.
Yeah.
And especially like studying for the bar. It's literally a marathon. Like you're waking up, you're going to Barbary, and you're literally sitting in the library until 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night.
Right.
And I think like if I would have worked, I would have had an understanding of how to actually work as opposed to, oh, this completely sucks. This sucks. I got to do this. Can't believe I got to study for 2 months to take this damn test, you know? And you're just going through it.
Yeah, the February bar is next week, so our some of our students are gearing up to take that. So we're wishing best of luck to them, and I plan on taking it.
I remember I did 60. I did Barbary and I did the PMBR course, and I did 60 questions a day at PMBR, and I went over every question that I got right and wrong. And then I did the Barbary stuff. So I was doing like 75 questions a day, I remember. I didn't do any of the essays for Barbary because I figured like, hey, I went to law school. I can figure out how to write an answer. But I just remember like just doing those multiple choice questions. And it was a terrible summer, but it was worth it.
Worth it. I've been told like the average number of multiple choice questions you should do is 2,000 in preparing. And when
that's probably about right. I remember I went through one of those full, they gave us 2 big PMBR books. I finished one of them. So I did a lot of questions.
Oh my goodness.
That's all I did though. That's literally all I did.
Yeah. It's interesting to talk to people and get their different study habits. Some people like stick exactly to what their Barbary or Themis tells them to do, and that's all they do. I have a friend that just passed the bar in October, and he's like, I did like half the course, and he's like, it wasn't working for me, so I took their outlines and I studied like I did in law school.
Yeah.
And it's
I remember just doing the questions. I forget what professor told me this, but somebody told me it's 200 questions. There's going to be 50 questions you're going to know the answer to. There's going to be 50 that you don't know the answer to, and the other 100 you're going to be able to narrow down to 1 or 2 questions. He said if you felt like if you feel like that after you leave, like you probably did okay. and to know that you're going to get 50, that you have 50 questions that you have no clue what the answer is, and then you're guessing on the other 2, it's not a good feeling.
No, I can imagine.
Not a good feeling. But yeah, I just remember just doing a lot of questions because I don't recall taking a lot of multiple choice or getting a lot of multiple choice in law school. And it's all about subjects that you had your first year.
Yep.
I didn't bother learning the rule of perpetuities. It was only going to be like 1 or 2 questions. I was like, you know what?
They still tell us that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to learn that. I didn't understand it when Professor Barrows taught it to me, so I'm not going to learn it now.
Yeah.
It's only going to be like 1 question, so I'll just skip that one. You know.
That's fair. Just pick C if you get to. When you come across it, just have an answer. I'm gonna go with C and hope for the best. So I think to wrap up our time, I have two final questions. The first one being, what I've asked you a lot of advice questions, but you've had some really good advice. So what advice you would give to anyone that's looking to attend law school?
What advice? The advice I would give is that you can do it, but you have to put the work in. You have to put the work in. You can't treat it like undergrad where you're just going to show up to class, you read the case, you answer a question. Like you have to do a little bit of work outside of class, because if you try to just study the night before, it's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for you. So I would tell anybody that you have to be motivated, but it's doable. You know, I think if I can get through law school, I think most people can, as long as you want to put the work in.
I agree with that. You have to want to be there.
Yeah, and then I think when you get to law school, and just like in real life, like you can't get outworked. You know, if you see people in the library, like a light bulb should go off, like, hey, maybe I should sit down and hit the books, because you can't go wrong just like outworking people.
I agree. And then my last question is, what's your most memorable moment from your time at Widener? We recently had a story of Professor Domino teaching class in a tuxedo, which is funny. It doesn't have to be anything, something you look back at law school and you're like, I remember that time.
You know what? My most memorable moment, I don't really have one. The Halloween parties, I think.
Those are always fun.
I think the Halloween parties. I always liked the Halloween parties. There was a like ABC Brewing Company, and it was always a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my most memorable moments are things that happen outside of law school with all my friends.
I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that is most important is maintaining like relationships while you're in law school, because those are the people that, depending on what kind of work you do, I never know where my next case is coming from. A lot of my cases come from other attorneys. I get a good amount of work from a lot of people that I went to school with. So it's always good to maintain those relationships, because you never know who's going to want to send you work. You're never going to know when you're going to be looking for a new job. And it's nice to just tap in and call somebody like, hey, what's going on? Like, do you know anybody hiring, and so forth. So that's the only advice I can give in regards to what to do while you're in law school. I would say network and just understand that you're really not alone, even though you feel like you might be.
I think that's really important to remember, and I'm glad you shared that. I'm going to thank you again for your time today. It was so nice to chat with you.
No, all good.
And for our viewers at home, stay tuned. We'll have more alumni interviews as time goes on. So thank you so much for joining us.